Stop, safely change tires. This is not a series that has a pit crew that flies over pit wall and changes tires. So same thing applies here if we start wet, and if we would happen to start seeing a dry line develop and teams would have the option to go to a slick potentially. That's really not something this series does.
No, just because of the nature of the race, it's only a 40-minute sprint race. What you'll see is just teams burn up those wet tires because there's only 2 people allowed to touch the car, and as you mentioned, that's a regulation to keep costs down, make sure that the privateer teams have equal opportunity as some of the bigger teams on the grid. And for that matter, even for the bigger teams, you know, when you're running 6, 7, 8 cars, it's a bit impossible to change all of those tires at once. But just because of the nature of the pit lane here as well, you lose a lot of time. So it would just make sense to try and manage your wet tyres as this track inevitably dries, and that's probably what we're going to see here. The Hankook rubber is extremely good in the wet, a great wet tyre from Hankook, but particularly on those SR10s, which have a lot of horsepower, 430 brake horsepower, conserving the rear tyre in particular may come into play as this race goes on. You can see at the moment there is just the hint of a groove, if you like, on the racetrack. Obviously under the bridge there's a little bit of a dry spot, but realistically it's going to take a few laps before we see a dry line, and that's going to be challenging for any kind of passing as well, because obviously if you're trying to make the pass offline, you're going to be back in the wet stuff.
And we're starting to see a few pockets around the racetrack that are raining more heavily than others. And when you have 640 plus acre facility, you have a different ecosystem, right, in some cases, north end to south end, or even east to west in some cases. So here on the front straightaway and into the Moraine Sweep, where the safety car is now entering turn 5, we're starting to see a little bit heavier downfall of some moisture here in the straightaway. But some of our other corners on the north end, we don't see as much of a rain traditional fall. But if we look at the radar right now, in full transparency, I don't think we're going to have to worry about a dry line developing. I think that we're going to be in a fairly consistent moisture stretch here for the duration of this 40-minute Radical Cup North America course. But the thing to keep in mind here, these are open cockpit cars, just like the ladder series that is here this weekend. The difference is, obviously, you have some bigger wing and some aero with 4 fenders on the car, so your spray is a little bit less than the open wheel cars.
A little bit. We can see on some of the vision already the rooster tails streaming up behind these cars. The downforce generated off the rear diffusers on the Radicals is really significant, and obviously coupled with the rear wing, as you mentioned, it's going to be tough out there for these guys. We heard the IndyCar drivers just talking about the wall of white, and no doubt all of these cars should have their rain lights on as well. It'll be a very similar effect for these drivers, where potentially, particularly back down further in the pack, you're just going to be met with a white screen in front of you and the occasional red dot, which will be the rain light. So these guys have got their work cut out for them, and really we'll look to see who stars in these different conditions. One person to watch for will be Wayne Williams. He's starting for position 8. The 57 of Wayne Williams, Dayglow yellow car. He was literally jumping for joy, celebrating, because it's wet, and he comes from the sprint car world, so a car that dances underneath him is exactly what he wants. And he still struggles a little bit when it's just perfect conditions and has to rely completely on the downforce of the car. So there he goes, Wayne Williams. Look out for him starting from position 8.
Well, the advantage is even with the rooster tails and the spray that are inevitable, these cars will put moisture up in the air, of course, once you just simply have speed. But looking at that car, you'll very easily be able to pick that car out even amongst the spray.
You will, and it is going to be a case of strong racing in all 3 classes, I think, today. We had it yesterday, of course, a few full cautions just catching up the field, if you will, or packing them up, and a great finish in the end. That green-white checker with Clintfield taking the win in the Platinum class. He'll start P2. Nick D'Orlando did take the win yesterday in Pro 1500, but it was Jack Yang who was faster yet again, so he'll start from the pole in that class. And Suelio Almeida taking his first true win. He actually did get a win at Barber, but it was through a penalty applied post-race. He was ecstatic to be on the top step of the podium yesterday, the sim racer come real-world racer. And if you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, Suelio Almeida, check it out, because it is very, very impressive not only what he's done in the sim racing world, making a career out of coaching people on the virtual side of life, but also now applying all the craft and all the knowledge that he's developed to the real world in the Radical Cup series. And he's got a great video explaining some of the trials and tribulations of Barber Motorsport Park. I'm sure there's going to be another one put out after this weekend.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at your starting grid here for Radical Cup North America, presented by McDonald's. Not a surprise on the front of the field, John Field leading the pack to green in the race winner from yesterday, Clintfield, on the outside of row number 1. Now that was a pretty dynamic finish that we missed John pull off completely.
Right, absolutely. So he had a gearbox issue, a bit of a rare one for the Hewland gearbox in the back of the Radical SR10. But nevertheless, they've put a fresh box in the back of that 37 machine, and expect father and son duo of Clint and John Field to be ones to watch. On the second row of the grid, it's Chip Romer and Louis Schreiber, also strong competitors. Schreiber, a local, so cheer on the 111 machine, starting from position 4. In P5, it's Greg Gorski. He'll be on the third row of the grid. Well, they're single file, aren't they? So he'll be joined by Jim Booth just behind him in the 63 McDonald's car.
And then you've got Jason Plotke in the 119 and the 57. Watch out for that Dayglow color car of Wayne Williams. Jack Yang, who had a very good race yesterday, rebounded quite a bit on, but very
unlucky not to take that win, mate.
Yeah, exactly. He was in position, though, and of course, someone who's been kind of wearing the black hat with the black cat hanging out underneath the ladder is Nick D'Orlando. He'll start from P10.
Absolutely, and Nick, a tremendous win, storming back up through the field and eclipsing Jack Yang on that final tour. Jason Greenwood will start from 11th on the grid. Jordan Missig from 12th. It's Spencer Schmidt, Sam Schmidt's son, from 13th. Evan Slater from 14th. Mike Anzaldi, and then Corey Nouveau. Austin Riley starts from 17th. We're still in the Pro 1500 grid. Then it's the pole sitter in Pro 1340, Maya Dionorine, and a fantastic drive from the Canadian to get that fastest lap and supersede, if you will, Suelio Almeida, who took that race win. Then it's back to David Flint from position 20. Chris McMurray will be vying for that 1340 win as well with Suelio and Maya. Blake McGovern will start behind him in position 22. Then it's Mike D'Ambrose Sr., who was our pole sitter yesterday. Jace Bacon, Seth Bacon, another father-son combo. And then Keith McGovern joins his son Blake, also on the grid, starting from position 26.
In 27th, it's Jack Zweifel and Mike D'Ambrose Jr. Kenny Nail will start P29. Evan Wolf in 30th position. Then Ben Blender, Richard Durachet, and Adam Gagne will round out the field. Mike Ellis is scratch again today.
I think there's a record on this grid. Not only is it the biggest grid here this weekend, but I have a feeling that's the most father-son combos that I've ever seen or read out. That's unbelievable, isn't it? We've got D'Ambrose Jr. Sr., the McGoverns, the Bacons, the Fields. Who am I missing? It's a pretty good sign. It's family fun in the Radical Cup North America Series. We've enjoyed a lot of this racetrack. In fact, going around last night just on the golf cart, seeing the crowd stream in here over the last 24 hours. I've never seen so many campers. The atmosphere is electric. It was fun to see everyone out here lining the fences yesterday evening for race 1. This is race 2 of 3. We'll be back here tomorrow morning for our final one, and that will feature a mandatory pit stop. But this one is a straight shoot. 40-minute sprint race, hopefully not too many full course cautions. But as we saw yesterday, the emergency crews around this racetrack very, very efficient. And quite honestly, it was almost like a competition yellow, wasn't it? It really closed in the field, and we got action straight away on each of those restarts.
So the impact of this second pace lap here with Radical Cup North America is we have started the time clock from the 40 minutes. So when they get green, it'll be just shy of about 35 minutes to go. So that extra pace lap took about 5.5 minutes. So that's the difference between a fast lap and a pace lap is about 5.5 minutes. Rain lap's going to be a little bit slower. So let's see what this field does. Lights are on in the safety car. John Field pulling ahead of Clint and pulling almost a 15 car length gap underneath the NTT data bridge. Coming to the TireRack.com starter stand, and we are green. John Field leading the field.
Yeah, John Field understands what the procedure was there. It's effectively a safety car start. There was no need to wait. He could go. He was in the lead of this train of cars, but you can see the spray coming off these cars. And Louis Schreiber goes to the inside, already around turn one, and a fantastic pass for him, but it's not over. Side by side as we go down into three. Hard to pick out the cars. Schreiber has pulled back a little bit. That's Chip Romer who's been passed by Schreiber. Clint Field still in second position.
And with this field under green, keep in mind with wet weather, sometimes being offline is better than being on the traditional race line because you've got less debris down, less moisture down, and in many cases, grip levels a little bit less polished on the surface, less standing water as well in offline, where these tires are going to be more effective.
Side by side again, Schreiber now clear of Chip Romer as Greg Gorski runs wide in 5. Another driver, Jim Booth, looking a little bit sketchy on the exit of the corner there, and then it's Jason Plotke. So plenty of action again, and Chip Romer's trying to hang it around the outside. The multi-time SCCA runoffs champions has got his work cut out. This is his first wet race in the Radical Cup Series and in these SR10s. Amazingly, we've remained green so far. The rest of the field coming down into turn 5 as John Field feels his way around the carousel. And looks like Louis Schreiber's in second.
Have a car spun in the bottom of 5. Got a couple of cars around over in 5 right at the moment, trying to see if those cars can get back underway, and they are. So we will stay green, local yellow only.
We have got
5.
Someone still just on the grass there. And it looks like Ellis may have actually started that race, and of course that car coming back on from the track was a little bit unsighted there. So we'll try and pick up the action here. The cars, amazing shots as they head off into the spray down into Canada Corner.
And this is the look from the kink into Canada Kettle Bottoms into Canada Corner. Another car going off. That looks like one of the fields maybe.
Yeah, the trouble is, of course, they've been behind the safety car. They've got an idea of how much standing water. They had no idea of the grip level. This is their first flying lap around this circuit. And every time you come into the braking zone, you're trying to test the limits. You've got competitors around you trying a little harder. And someone's going to come unglued. Unfortunately, a few people have, but so far, so good in terms of keeping this race green.
In fact, that was Clint Field that went wide in 12, I believe. He's dropped down to the 5th position, so Clint Field losing 4 spots.
Impressive again for Jack Gang. He's right up there, but it's D'Orlando who leads the Pro 1500 class. Evan Slater ahead of Jack Yang at the line, so I think they were racing side by side as we went up the front straight away.
D'Orlando has a lot of laps here in some open cockpit cars within the ladder system, and making good use of the Pro 1500 downforce right now, up to that 7th spot for the 1500 D'Orlando.
Maya Dionorine is still in the lead of Pro 1340, the Canadian ahead of an effective fellow Canadian, the Brazilian driver who resides in Canada, Suelio Almeida. Almeida, his first wet race. He's finding the grip levels.
Turn 1.
As that's, I think, the 57 of, I think that will be David Flint, looking at the livery there. So
you have a few cars off on the backside where the kink turns into Kettle Bottoms as well.
yeah, it's the car up against the wall and
full course yellow.
Well, no surprises there. A car up against the wall, and that's a bit of a nasty spot coming out through there. Wonder if we've just got a car in 12 as well. We've also had a spin at the exit of 5, even though we are under full course caution. So tricky conditions.
And with the new pavement here at Road America, there still is that about a season, and now we'll call it a season and a half on the pavement. It was completed in the October of 2022.
Got a car just stopped as we come up around about turn 13.
But the paving completed in the fall of 22, all of last season, and now about a half season in.
Smart driving there, getting out the way. So
blind corner as well, coming up out of Thunder Valley there.
Yeah, and you can just see it looks like the rear wing is folded down. One of the challenges on the Radical, the rear wings, for whatever reason, they are actually inside the bodywork. But when cars spin close to each other, it's easy to tag a rear wing end plate to rear wing end plate, and of course that just collapses the rear wing. You need that downforce around corners like turn 1 here at Road America, so that's game over, unfortunately, for him.
But touching on the pavement, it's still very smooth. You know, there's not a lot of abrasive worn off yet, even a season and a half in. So where you may have found a little bit more grip occasionally, the grip is fairly even still across the racing surface here at Road America. And without having any other sessions in the wet this weekend, obviously everyone learning here as we go. Under 30 minutes now, so we're about 11 minutes into the race. First full course yellow, hopefully the only one, but yesterday we did have 3 full course yellows, but they were very quick and we were able to get back underway.
Yeah, a little bit more for the emergency crews to do right now. There's cars strewn all over this racetrack. Of course, that's a high-speed area where we've got one of the cars that's stuck off to the side. And I think everyone just making sure that the competitors are right. 35 odd cars. It's a big grid. It's almost inevitable that you're going to see some kind of action. Couldn't actually see the lights on the pace car there, though. But I imagine we're not going to go green anytime soon.
Safety car lights are on at 5.
So John Field managed to convert the pole into the early lead in the Platinum class. Louis Schreiber rocketed up. He started P4, and we were talking about having a great battle with Chip Roma. Clint Field was right in the thick of it too. Clint, I think, had quite a good start to the race. It's sort of settled down there a little bit. So John Field from Louis Schreiber, Greg Gorski, Chip Roma, Clint Field. That's the top 5, and they're all Platinum class cars. Then it's the leader in Pro 1500, and D'Orlando coming through with that win. Early on, we were saying he was unlucky. Yesterday's race had to take avoiding action in the final corner.
Mike Anzaldi on pit lane right now. They're looking at what looks like the rear diffuser or the rear bonnet cover.
And a lot of these drivers really have to think about the championship. It's not just about this race. The other element to it is, of course, that the lap times in this race will set the grid for race 3. So even if you do have a little bit of damage, if you can get it repaired, whilst you might go a couple of laps down, it is worth getting out there and recirculating and trying to put in a burner, because you're going to need to have the lap time under your belt to try and claw your way up the grid in race 3.
Underneath the Mission Foods Bridge over to the beach. Not a sunny day at the beach today, unfortunately.
No. But plenty of race fans enjoying everything out here.
These pace laps excruciatingly slow if you're in the cockpit of these race cars. You just want to kind of get in and go, even with the conditions.
Absolutely. And I think one person will be looking really, really to go again is Suelio Almeida. He's got a few cars in between himself and Mayo Dinorin. And Swelio was ecstatic, we mentioned on the podium, taking his first true victory, if you will. He had a win, but this was the first time he was on the top step of the podium. And I can tell you, after watching his highlights from Barber, he will be that committed to trying to take the win in Pro 1340. One to watch, the number 3 black and gold car. Chris McMurray will also be one to watch. Those guys, those two have been rivals, and there's been a fair bit of contact between the two. Chris, a very experienced driver, has been to Le Mans a couple of times, and quite aggressive, elbows out. And I think Swelio Almeida's found what real world racing is all about there.
So it looks like over in the kink, we actually had a car go around and make contact to driver's right. Can't quite make out who it was on the off-air replay, but who was ever in traffic behind certainly had a visor full of spray, and then all of a sudden a car headlights running around. So contact back in the kink is what put us underneath this yellow.
Yeah, I think that was the 333 of Seth Bacon. So out of Crown Concepts. He's a couple laps down. So yeah, we did lose David Flint in turn 1. It was Seth Bacon that was involved. Looks like we also lost Jack Swiffle as well. That was the white car that pulled in. So Seth Bacon's out. Jace Bacon remains. He's sitting in 17th overall. And between himself and Blake McGovern, Chris McMurray, Crown Concepts and Apex Motor Club have plenty of drivers still in the hunt for the Pro 1340 win. Ricebeck Racing, their sole car this weekend, Mayor Dionorine, has converted his pole position. Jordan Missig, he'll also want this to go green again. I think there was frustration yesterday in qualifying when he got tagged by a slower competitor. Couldn't quite convert anything yesterday. And car 75 is also trundling down pit lane. So that's David Flint. He was the one that was stuck in the gravel out in turn 1.
So it looks like they're just about done over in the kink area. Looks like they're just getting that car up on the hook. Safety team still out there. So depends on where the safety car is right now into 4A. So coming into turn 5, we may have enough time to get that safety truck off the race course at 13. Be able to go back door, maybe be able to go back racing with about 20 minutes left to go in the session. A fast approaching halfway mark here in Radical Cup.
Yeah, after such a strong start from everyone, it's a bit frustrating to have this extended yellow, but the emergency crews doing everything they can to clear this. It must be just a challenging recovery there to get this car on the back of the hook. I think the other element to this is that, the emergency crews want this show to go on as much as anyone else watching from the sidelines. So we've just got to wait until the track clears. Coming out of the kink, very high speed area of the circuit. You can see it's the champion wall of champions on the right hand side there. You can see all the tyre marks from people who haven't quite made it over the years.
Wrecker and safety truck now moving into Kettle Bottom, so that may be a good sign here as the field's approaching. If they can scamper away here, but it's possible that we may go one more under yellow. We'll kind of see where the safety team is with the field fast approaching, especially the way that John has kind of found the restart zone yesterday, in fact, as well, very quickly through the gears on the exit of turn 14.
Very much so. Just looking to check where Wayne Williams is in the 57, but he must have had a big moment somewhere out there. The rain hasn't been kind to the dirt track start. He's down in 20th position with some work to do, but look out for the 57 to carve his way up through the field. That's sort of going to throw a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons in terms of the classes, because ahead of him, he's got all sorts of Pro 1340 drivers vying for the lead and a championship, all sorts of Pro 1500 drivers, and everyone's going to have to be a little bit heads up. So the red flag has actually come out now, and the cars will be brought into pit lane. They're likely to line up just in order. So obviously the challenges of here of cleaning up equipment and wreckage from that wreck.
Well, it sounds like we may have had a car that had a trail of fluid coming out from underneath it and not of the rain kind. So it's possible that we may have an oil down in this situation. And oil and water do not mix.
Definitely not. And the one that sits on top is not the good one either. So, yeah, I think that's a good call, because it was almost a bit uncanny. We just seemed to lose a number of cars around the racetrack almost instantly, and I just wonder whether that was a few people catching the oil that was being put down. Whether or not that came out of the 333 of Seth Bacon or another car, we will not know. Safety car is coming into pit lane. Everyone's going to trundle in behind.
Not what we wanted to see here with our second race of the weekend here for Radical Cup. Clock is still continuing to wind underneath this red flag. Of course, as we know, this is a time-certain schedule this weekend, along with the NTT IndyCar Series. USF Pro Championships have their race coming up directly following this, and to make sure that our days, which are scheduled all the way from 8 a.m. to about 6:05 Central Time here in Wisconsin, for those of you watching around the globe, we're on a time-certain schedule. So unfortunately, the clock does not stop here underneath this red flag. So these teams losing track time with the oil down, and that's certainly unfortunate.
One good thing, though, for Radical Cup is, of course, the amount of track time that competitors get all throughout the weekend. And so whilst we've got a red flag here, these guys have already done hours and hours around this racetrack. In fact, more than any other series here this weekend. A big day of testing, almost 3 hours on Thursday. Then, of course, yesterday was a massive day with 2 practice sessions, an hour of practice, followed by qualifying and a race. And so at the end of the day, safety's got to take precedence here. And, you know, again, everyone wants to go racing around this fantastic facility. But the reality is there's no point putting another 34 drivers and cars in jeopardy.
So the clock continues to wind, technically, for the next 17 and a half minutes here in race 2. Unknown if they'll be able to get this race back underway. To this point, it kind of depends on the track inspection. It looks like safety team is down in turn 12 at this point on the entry to 12. So that is where potentially that line developed. So that may have been what caught out.
Well, it may have been what caught out at least Jack Zwiffel, because we saw him with the rear wing that was folded down just after that. And he, of course, pulled into the cut through there at 13, heads up driving. But that might be the one that at least got caught out by the oil.
But depending on where it started to get put down, certainly could have affected something in the back of kettle bottoms or past the kink before they realized the problem. But
and Seth's car certainly, it snapped quite quickly, didn't it? The 333, the red car, turning quite quickly into the wall. So he may have just dropped a wall on the curb, of course. And some of these incidents might just be unrelated and just happenstance that they all seem to happen within 30 seconds, a minute or so on the racetrack.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday during race 1, but certainly a lot of these teams, the family that is your paddock area, down inside turn 14 and inside turn 13 as well, in the cutout, two separate paddock areas. But you talked quite considerably about the dealer network here in the United States for Radical Cup North America.
Absolutely. I think I think we're probably the only race car manufacturer with a true dealer network, but a number of dealers all around the country. Of course, a huge one just south of us in Chicago, out at Autobahn, Team Stradale, dealers at a lot of the preeminent country clubs like Spring Mountain, Apex in Arizona. We have, of course, just announced a brand new dealer down in Tampa, Enclave Motor Club, and some great dealers, the likes of Radical Northwest up at Sonoma Raceway, EVR at Virginia International Raceway. Two Canadian dealers, one on the west coast at Area 27 and one just out of Toronto. Radical New York, based on Long Island as well. So there's plenty of opportunities to get into these cars if you want to start. We have another dealer, or two dealers with racing schools, one at Spring Mountain and the other at Atlanta Motorsport Park with the Primal Racing School, and they use the SR1s. In fact, we just had a really fantastic competition. Speaking of sim racing come real world racing, the Prodigy Racing Series uses the Radical SR1s out at Atlanta Motorsport Park, and that was a collective of drivers from all around the world, sim racers that had won the ability to live out their dreams, and some fantastic drives. In fact, the most impressive people were indeed those that hadn't had any real world experience before jumping into the sim, or for that matter, the Radical SR1. And these cars, just a great training tool, but it's not really fair to describe them that way. When we've had the Formula One stars in, we had Lewis Hamilton in a car at Barbados a few years ago. Lando Norris has checked out a car at Autobahn Country Club a couple of years ago. Number of IndyCar stars driving them at the Race of Champions. Jenson Button, all sorts of folk, and they all can't believe how hard you can push these machines, the level of downforce, the mechanical grip, the braking performance in particular. And you can really see that around this racetrack into turn 5, into turn 12, where we're looking now. It's unbelievable to see how well these guys can extract so much performance out of these machines. Relatively diminutive engine capacities in the SR3s. The Pro 1340 with the green on the rear wing, just 1340 cc's, and around about 205 horsepower out of that engine. The 1500 variant of the SR3, the most popular around the world, and unbelievable that there's almost, I think, somewhere in the order of 1,500 to 2,000 cars here in North America. But the SR3, the preeminent car at the country clubs, and the 1,500, with about 230 brake horsepower. That's got the red on the rear wing, and then the yellow on the rear wing indicates a platinum class. It's the Radical SR10 with 430 brake horsepower, 380 foot-pound of torque from a Ford-derived EcoBoost engine. All of these cars featuring the big front splitter, big rear diffusers, big rear wings, plenty of aero, and so they are true wings and slicks cars. Of course, all shotting the Hankook wet at the moment.
Well, the good news is right now that it looks like the safety team is hopping aboard the red truck. So that's good news. It means that they're paying less attention to the corner, and potentially we can maybe get a resumption with a few moments left.
Yeah, there's over 10 minutes remaining on the clock.
And so sweeper truck out on race course, doing a little bit of a track inspection, I would imagine.
Now,
so looking to see if there's potentially any other fluid down elsewhere in the race course.
Now, what would you be like if you're in the cockpit of these cars on pit lane? This is
Chomping at the bit, really.
Well, you would, except if you're the guys leading. John Field would be saying, "Look, mate, I'm ready to go to the podium right now." So too for Nick D'Orlando. He's looking to back up his race win from yesterday.
Certainly. Louis Schreiber +2, so he's up to second, started fourth.
Mayor Dionorine will also be thinking to himself, look, we don't need to go racing. He's probably pleading on the radio, tell race control, it's too dangerous out there. We don't want to go back racing. But of course, the rest of the guys will want to get going. And with 10 minutes remaining, it could be possible that we can get out and do it.
Sounds like motors have maybe fired on pit lane.
Well, that's good news. Like yesterday, I think we're going to see a pretty climactic finish to the race.
We had the one-lap dash yesterday, did we not?
It's I wonder if we need to make this part of our regulations moving forward.
Irony can be pretty ironic sometimes. So in this situation, there's a good chance that a caution lap here about 5.5, 6 minutes. So if we do get the field moving here, maybe one, maybe two. But they'd have to get going now in order to get more than one. So still track inspection continuing. I'd imagine they just want to make sure here, as it looks like a safety truck. Looks like they may have had something down over in 7. I guess we didn't notice that either. So still a safety team doing a track inspection up in 7.
So perhaps all of these incidents were related. Because there does appear to be a little bit of something on the surface in a few places around this racetrack. Again, much better to clean this up, and it's a real shame for the Radical Cup North America competitors, but obviously there's a big day of action here at Road America, and that's the luck of the draw sometimes.
The good news is for Radical Cup, still another race yet tomorrow.
Right, and I think we did go over half race distance, so I think these guys are going to get full points for their efforts out there in these trying conditions before we went to the red flag. If indeed we can't get going again, it certainly is looking slightly less likely as the clock continues to count down.
So still a couple of areas that may have some residuals left on the surface, but that concentration of that safety team over in turn 7, to be very honest, would tell me that it's a restart coming up here is somewhat unlikely.
Well, if that's the case, John Field will be back where he thinks he belongs, on top of the Platinum Class podium. Louis Schreiber is going to back up his performance in yesterday's race and come away with another podium, one better. Greg Gorski will find himself on the Platinum Class podium. All of these are, of course, provisional, because not only do we not know that they're not going to circulate again, but we're not sure that someone hasn't passed under yellow or something like that. But Greg Gorski, that would be nice for the 24 machine. He just announced that he's going to go to the Radical World Finals at Yas Marina. So that's fantastic news. And we expect to see a number of competitors join their compatriots from the Middle East, Europe, the UK, as far as away as New Zealand and Australia and Asia for the Radical World Finals later this year. Yas Marina is going to be an absolutely spectacular venue for that. And Greg Gorski immediately putting his hand up as soon as that was announced, saying he'll be there. Nick D'Orlando is sitting pretty to take the win in Pro 1500. Evan Slater was second on the track in Pro 1500 at the time of the red flag. Jordan Missig was third. So that'd be a really good result for Evan in the 35 machine for EVR Racing. And Evan was quite calm in the practice days. Felt he had a little bit more pace and perhaps he'd shown. Yesterday's race was not too bad, 5th in class, but he's definitely found his feet in these conditions today. Maya Dionorine definitely also found his feet in the wet conditions. He was fastest in yesterday's race after a messy one, but got back out there. Finished 12th in class yesterday, but got back out there, put his head down, put in a lap, and that put him on the pole for today's race. He's looking to convert that into a win from Suelio Almeida and Chris McMurray.
So looking at the situation over in turn 7, safety team and 2 of the sweeper trucks up there.
Just trying to see if I can hear any engines in pit lane. I don't think I can anymore.
Yeah, what we heard was an engine fire up, but it quickly cut the power as well. But if there is any chance of resumption, I would imagine it may just simply be to send them around to complete the lap they're currently on, which would be lap 5.
Formally take the checker.
Correct.
Well, it's going to be a slightly muted celebration, I imagine, on the podium. Maybe not for some, but for others, they'll be thinking, what if? What if we could have gone green again? Could I have had an opportunity to make the move? It's always a challenge.
Turn 8 also looks to be affected here. You see an early apex entry.
It's definitely a lot more of this racetrack than we first thought, isn't it? So I think perhaps the offs that we saw almost instantaneously around the racetrack were all probably related. And that sort of goes, that's about right, isn't it? Because before then, we'd actually seen some really strong driving. We hadn't really seen anyone really have many issues.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of elbows up, elbows out, racing in the first going, which is to be somewhat expected as competitive as these cars are in the wet. But at the same time, this is a situation where probably a loose fitting, something putting down where, not necessarily recognizing that there's a performance loss with the car before it was unfortunately too late in this instance.
Well, we're going to be back here tomorrow morning for race 3. The good news for the Radical Cup competitors, we're all going over to the karting centre soon, so we can continue this race just in a slightly different format. We try and have a lot of fun here at Road America. Lunch will be coming up, and then karting.
So they, it sounds like they may be resuming with a checkered flag at 12:20, which would be 11 minutes away. So they've restarted the clock with 10:25.
Well, that's exciting news.
So,
well, emergency crews, it's time to get off the racetrack. We need to go racing here in the Radical Cup North America Series, presented by McDonald's. I wonder if those cars are firing up again in pit lane. That's certainly given me a bit of hope. And now all those drivers will need to try and focus down. It really is a case of trying to reset the grey matter in between the helmet. You've just experienced a racetrack that's been wet. People still finding their feet in these conditions. The track is probably just ever so slightly drying all this time.
Well, the advantage of having a little bit of a breeze still, I mean, not nearly as windy as it's been the last 2 days. Now, all things considered, the 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts that we had the last 2 days might have helped dry this place a little bit faster. But in this situation, you do somewhat see a little bit of a development of a drier line here, at least on the straightaway. But the straightaway crowned just a bit as well, so water going to kind of come off the center and flow downward towards the white lines. But Looks like cleanup is continuing in turn 8.
There are a couple of trucks leaving the scene, aren't there?
The
So
safety team specifically going away at a little bit faster rate. So maybe we're going to get a little bit of good news here.
it's really tough for these drivers now. They're sitting sopping wet in the race car. The belts have probably been undone for a while. The mind has wandered from what they were just doing, and now they've got to refocus.
Sweeper truck looks like going to be exiting at the cut at the inside of 8, but don't want to get your left front wheel off into just inside the curb for sure. I mean, obviously the curb, a little bit of a vibration there, but looks like there's a little bit of standing water behind the curb as well.
I'm not sure we want the sweeper truck to get stuck there either. There's a lot of moisture behind that curb, isn't there? So it just goes to show we had a lot of rain earlier in the week. Obviously, we've had some good dry running for the last couple of days, as you say, albeit being windy. But realistically, the weather has been pretty strong this weekend.
So understand there's 8 minutes on the clock. There'll be 2 minutes to resume. It'll probably be a pace lap and go.
I think so.
Similar to how we would have had yesterday ended. That would be my assumption.
So if that's the case, I'm just wondering how many laps we get. We might be lucky and get a couple laps in. It's going to be tight, though. Depends really how quick this pace lap is. I imagine they're going to want it to be really quick, though, because you need to generate some heat in the tyres. You can't afford to let these cars wander around. The Hankook rubber needs to come up to temperature.
The advantage is we do have a little bit of a window here between this session and the next USF 2000 round, round 1 for USF 2000 at 12:30. So if we can complete this by 12:20, that would certainly get us into a little bit of the 15-minute break we had in between the two, kind of taking up a little bit of extra time in the break, but that's kind of built into the day for things like this.
Pit lane has been cleared. I think that safety car is about to trundle out. The umbrellas are down. The crews are departing from the side of the cars. The safety car's rolling. So we're going to get a restart for the Radical Cup North America Series. Let's just hope all of these cars fire up. Rain lights are on. John Field's already getting ready, warming up the surface of his tyres.
How many laps has he run in the rain over the years?
Well,
not just this configuration of race car.
I was reminded of his outstanding maneuver a couple of years ago down into turn 1 in exactly these conditions. John Field took so much speed compared to the guy that he was passing at the time and just went right around the outside. It was a beautiful pass, flat out in the wet, with the rooster tail spraying behind him and using all of the downforce from his Radical machine.
Many races in the prototype category cars over the years as well for John. Clint as well.
Yeah, America Le Mans Series champions. And, of course, John and Clint. I think Clint was the youngest starter at Le Mans. So, held that title for many years, until perhaps even Chris McMurray's son took over that accolade. But McMurray, another Le Mans starter. There's some big names in this field, and some young guns as well, making some pretty big names for themselves as well. Jordan Missig, of course, double duty this weekend, Indy Next and Radical Cup. He's trying to win a championship in the Radical Cup, leads the points at the moment. Trying to make a mark as well as he learns the Indy Next machines. He's been thrown into the deep end on that one. He's hasn't had done any testing really in those cars. Knows the Radicals a bit better and is leading the championship. Of course, Nick D'Orlando really pleased to be running cars and in Radical Cup. Both of those drivers with Graham Rahal Performance. But there's plenty of others. Corey Nouveau, Evan Slater, who we mentioned, Austin Riley, Maya Dionorine, Swelio Almeida, Blake McGovern, Jace Bacon. Lots of young guns, and in the mix there's a plenty of veteran drivers who know these radicals like the back of their hand. Some of these guys have probably done more laps around the racetracks like Spring Mountain and Autobahn than anyone will ever do, running week in, week out in radicals. And so I think some of the young guys feel that they might get an easy break and then quickly find the competitive nature of the Radical Cup Series is one of the highest in the country. And some of these guys that have got a few grey hairs know a thing or two about how to steer these motor cars around a racetrack quickly.
Someone like John Field, of course, very long in the tooth with lots of experience, both here and abroad as well.
You've got others, though, too, like Jim Booth was running very, very quickly yesterday. Jim Booth had 14 radicals now. He's raced over in Europe with his son. He's been running in the US for many, many years. We've got others, too. Louis Schreiber now, long-time competitor. Greg Gorski.
Louis Schreiber's right on the gearbox here of...
I don't think he's going to be caught out like he was.
No, I think he was caught sleeping there a little bit. Same start as yesterday, so I would anticipate a white and green here at the TireRack.com starters bridge. But safety cars pulled away. This time Louis Schreiber's there, but he's waiting.
Ladies and gentlemen, get back trackside because the action's about to come thick and fast, I think, as John Field accelerates down the straightaway here at Road America. Louis Schreiber already having a look to the outside. The green flag flies here once again for the Radical Cup North America Series. And straight away into turn one, we've got a motor race.
Schreiber ducks all the way down, offline to the inside, ducks way back to the outside, but Field throws it in. Both of them lose traction, and Field outside the racing line. Can Schreiber capitalize into turn three? Looks to the inside.
Greg Gorski's run into trouble into turn one. That has allowed someone to take a run on him. I think it's Chip Romer. It's actually Clint Field. So Romer sitting just ahead of them. Side by side, Gorski and Field, the younger of the two, underneath the Sargentino Bridge.
Towards turn 5 in the Moraine sweep, Schreiber looking to the inside, filling the mirrors of John Field as they enter turn 5. Schreiber trying to go the long way round. They touch on the exit of 5.
Oh, and you can see a little wiggle from the back of Schreiber's car as John Field just used a little bit more racetrack, leaning on, but I mean, it's wet conditions. I don't think you can say much about that. He was just trying to put the hammer down.
A little bit of elbow there, never hurt. 8 always turns better than 4.
So, behind them, there's a pretty intense battle too for 1,500. We'll try and pick up some of that action as we watch the Platinum class cars come around. Heard there's a little bit of commotion further back in the pack.
Car in turn 5 is around facing counter, back underway.
Some interesting lines around the carousel. A few people trying to
Again,
take
offline,
the high line.
Yeah, offline, high line, going to be faster in these conditions with the track developing a little bit more of a straight line. Of course, we don't know where the fluid was down previously. But the leaders of this motor race coming towards Canada Corner for the final time.
Yeah, John Field looks pretty comfortable. Louis Schreiber just hasn't been able to match the pace he was early on, but John Field's extended his lead. I'm really excited to see how this is going to play out in Pro 1500 and Pro 1340. We'll have to wait, I think, until they cross the line. John Field, he's just got one more corner to navigate. He puts the power down. Louis Schreiber looks a little stronger, but it's all too late. John Field will come up the straightaway and take the checker flag. Congratulations, he's held on for a win. Louis Schreiber home second. And then I think it's going to be Greg Gorski. So the order didn't change in the Platinum class.
Field did get around Romer, however.
But we're waiting to see who does the business. And unbelievably, on the line, Nick D'Orlando takes a win, I think, from Evan Slater. It was so close. Jordan Missing picks up third place in Pro 1500. and Spencer Schmidt just crossed the line. It's Maya Dino Noreen, who has held on for a win in Pro 1340. Swelio Almeida made up plenty of space on that final tour to finish second. Chris McMurray is third in Pro 1340 from Jace Bacon, and Blake McGovern rounds out the top 5 in that class. So once again, great action from a one-lap dash in the Radical Cup. I think that was worth waiting for.
Absolutely. But Dianorine in 1340 with Suelo Almeida, and it looks like Chris McMurray, third step of the podium.
Right. So, fantastic.
Well, that turned into
job.
a right proper motor race, did it not?
I think it did. I think it did. It was good to see a little bit more action. Thank you to everyone in race control and around this circuit for allowing the Radical Cup. And Mike Ellis just a bit out of whack on the timing screen for whatever reason, but it is John Field from Louis Schreiber and Greg Gorski. And then we move back. You can see in P12 it was Maya Dino Noreen from Swelio Almeida and Chris McMurray, the top 3 in that Pro 1340 class. Jason Plotke right down there in 19th. Spencer Schmidt in 20th, obviously not having the run he'd wanted. In the Pro 1500s, it's D'Orlando from Evan Slater and Jordan Missig. D'Orlando just pipping Evan Slater, pumping the fist. And a good run for Austin Riley, finishing 11th overall. Or actually, yeah, it's 9th on the timing that I can see. So we've had a couple of glitches, I think,